Welcome to the Resonance Lab, a podcast from the Nova Method for marketing and communications leaders. In each episode, we talk with communications, marketing, and brand leaders about how they build messaging, content, and campaigns that resonate. I'm Michelle Baum, co-founder and COO of the Nova Method, and with me today is Hope Timberlake. Hope is a communications consultant, coach, and author of the book Speak Up, Damn It, How to Quiet Your Fears, Polish Your Presence, and Share Your Voice. Her coaching and training focus on persuasive messaging, executive presence, influence skills, and cross-functional collaboration. For the past 20 years, Hope has partnered with organizations largely in the tech and financial services sector, including Salesforce, Twilio, Splunk, BlackRock, and many private equity firms. She's passionate about inspiring women and leaders to communicate with confidence and clarity. Welcome, Hope. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. We're going to learn a lot from you. Hope and I have worked together in the past, and I have always learned so much from you. So I'm excited to share your knowledge with our listeners.
Great.
Can you tell us more of the type of the work that you do and the clients that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in the Bay Area and close to San Francisco. So I've worked with a lot of tech clients over the course of my career. Before that, I was working for a New York-based consulting firm, and that was a lot of financial services clients. So those are the industries I've worked in. But in terms of what I do, it's pretty much anything underneath the umbrella of communication, which could mean someone pitching business or pitching investors for their startup, to doing an all-hands meeting or speaking to customers on a big stage, or a lot of internal communication like team alignment. Either maybe a leader needs to have better executive presence or the leadership team needs to work better together. So it's pretty much anything that is involving communication internally and externally.
Who doesn't need it, honestly? Who doesn't need training?
Right.
You also wrote an awesome book with a great title. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yes. So the title Speak Up, Damn It is about an exercise. And I'll tell you about the exercise in a second, but the reason I wrote the book is it was fall of 2019, and I was working a ton of conferences, customer conferences, and going to Las Vegas and Toronto and Orlando and all over the place. And I thought, wow, so many of the people I'm working with are tech bros. And I love all my clients, but I was noticing a theme of they were what one client who is this jokingly said, pale, male, and stale. And it wasn't true. Some of them weren't pale. Almost all of them were male, and many of them were not stale. But I realized I really wanted to give the same skills, the same coaching, the same attention to women who were not at the height of their career, or people who weren't either in a leadership role or just didn't feel comfortable speaking up or communicating well. And so I wrote this book of basically codifying all my coaching into a very pragmatic, lesson by lesson exercise full book, so that people who couldn't get a coach or the work didn't provide a coach for them, they could get the same kind of information as I would give them. So the Speak Up, Damn It piece is an exercise where people, and more often in my experience, women than men, will at times end their sentences up as if they're asking a question. So I'll call it upspeak. So they might say, we should look at the financials, or maybe we should consider this alternative. And so there's the qualifier of the maybe in there, but also the upspeak will give indication that they're not confident or not sure. So instead of doing that, I have people take their hand into a fist and say the statement that they want to say. And at the end of the statement, practice by taking their fist and slamming it on the table and saying, damn it. So instead of we should look at the financials, it's we should look at the financials, damn it. So it's an exercise. I'm not telling them to use their fist or the damn it in the actual meeting, but to practice how to be assertive and how to sound confident when they are requesting or suggesting something.
This is amazing. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it with this next question.
Okay.
Because I think the biggest question most people have is there are so many smart, experienced executives out there. And once they get on a stage or they get in front of a media personality or they're in the boardroom, I don't know if fall apart, probably not that, but They kind of lose that sense of engagement, that sense of resonance. So, my question is, Hope, why do so many smart, experienced leaders fail to connect with their audience? Damn it.
Excellent question. Damn it. Okay, I love this question. And it's so interesting because people could be very confident in their personal life or with their team or with their colleagues, and then all of a sudden the stakes get higher and we see a different version. And when we talk about stages, and maybe that's a literal stage at a conference, but it could also be the virtual all hands where all eyes are on them. And so there's a couple things happening. One is, I love the expression, and it's not my expression, but what got you here won't get you there. So the idea of leaders, as they move up the ladder, they are doing things that help them to become leaders. But when they become the leader, they need to pivot some of their skills. So some of the perfectionism or drive or meticulousness or attention to all the details that might have helped them get to the leadership position can hurt now that they're there, in terms of, I need to get this right. I need to have every word correct. I need to wordsmith this. I need to memorize it. I need to do any number of things. And that is absolutely what you shouldn't be doing. So there's that one segment of people do it that way, are like more too perfectionist or in their head or focused or really afraid of messing up in some ways. So they are so focused on every word. Like, the idea is that we really want to be more natural. You want to be confident, you want to be focused, but you really want to be focused on your audience. And that's the other thing, is like, it's not so much the other group, but it can be another group that is more just self-conscious, and they're worried about what other people are thinking, or they feel the eyes on them and they're incredibly uncomfortable with that. And in both cases, it's an internal focus. So ironically, sometimes this idea of like, I'm self-conscious, what are they going to think of me? The more that they're thinking that, the more that people are going to think poorly of them, because they are not displaying some version of like, I am connecting with you. I care about you. I want you to understand this information. I want to create resonance with my audience, because as you know, as you preach, it's not about us. It's
Right.
about the audience. It's about audience first. And so, like the Nova Method, you do this, and it's, the core foundation of what you do, and the core foundation of what I do is really thinking about what's in it for your audience. How can you make create an experience for them? How can you connect with them? And for you, it might be more about like the words, and it is the words for me too, but it's also really about the body language, the eye contact, the energy, the gestures. So like, if you were connecting with a person in a networking type setting or in a social setting, having that same body language and the same mannerisms that you would have in those settings, where you're like, I care and I want to connect with you and I want what I'm sharing to resonate with you, versus being on a stage or being in a video meeting where you get paralyzed because you're more worried about your inner critic or all the things happening that are, your self-defeating thoughts.
So, you're saying get out of your own head.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Huh.
Yes.
When you hear the word resonance,
Yes.
what does it mean to you in the context of public speaking?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like resonance is such a beautiful word, and it means being able to connect, making sure that the people you are communicating with really feel and have that experience of understanding and relatability with the speaker.
So, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you make that happen? I mean,
Yeah.
read your book, of course.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about being a good speaker?
I really do think it's that they think that they need to be perfect.
Mm.
And there's something so beautiful about being human when you're communicating. You might have some filler words, some ums and ahs. You might ramble a little. You might have a little upspeak. A lot of those things are not helpful, but we want to be human. And so if we are able to get over this idea that we need to be perfect communicators and be prepared, absolutely. Think about your audience, think about what they need, craft your key messages, rehearse, like do the work, And then you show up and you be your best human self. And you think, my job today is to connect with Michelle. And that's what I'm doing here. And anything else, if I stumble a little bit, if I repeat myself, if I rambled in one of my prior answers, let it go and just focus on, let me know what Michelle needs right now and how I want to connect best with her in this experience.
Yeah, I know when I have done talks before, I have found that if I try to memorize what it is I'm trying to say, I spend more time thinking about the words that are supposed to come next than I do engaging with the audience. So I've learned with practice and time to just know that I'm going to have to wing it at some point. And it's better to be more engaged than it is to get those words just right. Or at least that's been my experience so far.
100%. I have never seen someone who is memorized, who doesn't have some version of a little bit of a screen that separates them from the audience.
Yeah.
And instead of winging it, Michelle, I think one thing that we talk about is, when I say we, like Forte Consulting and communication coaches, we in this field, we talk about, okay, knowing your audience, knowing your objective, and then structure. So having your structure
Yeah.
of like, okay, in this section, I'm going to talk about this, and these are the main messages I'm going to share. And each time I do it, I might say it a little bit differently, but I know that this is the first section I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to talk about in the second section. So we have guardrails and we
Yes.
have some version. And then I'll say, great, rehearse it. And what I want you to do is, I hope that every time you rehearse it, it sounds different. That's okay. That's great. Just get, as long as you know what the main points are in each of those sections. Ideally, it's sort of like an opening. You've got three sections within and a closing, and you know the key messages you want to share within that, maybe some examples, and then go at it. I mean, we are the experts of our information.
Yeah.
We get all tripped up when we think like, oh, there's an audience and there's eyes on me, but the structure really helps too.
Yeah, and I used to tell my students all the time when I was teaching, nobody knows the information
That's right.
or what you're going to say
That's right.
more or better than you do.
So true.
So if you do mess up, likely that your audience will not know.
That's
So
true.
keep going.
Yes,
Do
exactly.
you have a process for understanding the audience psychology before giving a talk? CEOs on stages, you've got maybe hundreds of thousands of people. How do you understand the audience psychology of a large group? And then when you're thinking about preparing for an all hands meeting internally, what kinds of things do you have to think about and how does that shift how you prepare for that speech?
The audience analysis piece is, in some ways, it's what we call common sense, but not common practice. So it's not like I have some magic rubric for exactly what to do, but sometimes it's just like thinking from like going big to small. So okay, so what's happening for this room? Like, who are they? Who are they? And maybe a range of people. Maybe it's, I'm working with a tech company and they are the engineers, but they're also the salespeople and they're also the leaders and they're also the sort of entry level people. Okay, so now I've got lots of roles, but I know they're in tech. Okay, so what's happening in tech right now? Or what's happening? Maybe it's focused on, communications, AI communications. And so what's happening in that space? All right, what are they excited about? What are they scared about? What do they need? What are what's going on? And like, try to think of like the person who represents that room and what questions do they have? Like, what will make this a success? So, if a series of questions that we'll ask, but it's not like it's an exhaustive list. And then coming through with like really thinking, if I'm sitting in their chair, if I have to then listen to what this communication is and then go back to work, what do I need? And again, what am I worried about? What am I motivated by? And taking a good amount of time to think that through and then not losing that, like keeping that in mind when we come up with the objective, when we come up with the key message, the structure. And then particularly when we're editing it or making decisions of, do I include this or do I include that? It's like, does the audience need it? Or is it something that I love that I feel like is important? But, it's in the writing world, we talk, it's not really a great expression, but killing your babies. So often, like, you're the author and you're so excited about this content and you have and you're like wedded to it. And then your editor comes through and they were like, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to kill your babies. And it's just like, because at the end of the day, like your target reader or your target listener isn't going to resonate with that as much as you do. And so being okay with like really thinking about it from their perspective rather than from our perspective, which the other thing too is having someone else like double check it because we just have so many biases. It's hard for us to get over that. And to have a colleague or a friend or a mentor to like look through it or listen to it and be like, that doesn't really resonate with this audience. So let's take a step back and add this detail or take out that information.
Yeah. And I think about that in terms of I've seen speakers who were powerful, but I left and I moved on with my life. And I've seen other people speak where their message really stuck with me, something that I kind of ruminated on for days or weeks. And I'd love to know, what is the secret to that? And is it the engagement resonance piece? Obviously it is, but
Yeah.
I mean, what is it that they're doing? Do you find that it's the story that they're telling? Do you find it's the emotional way that they're saying it? Is there, a magic
Yeah.
process or something that you reveal in your book about how to be that speaker who leaves that lasting impression? Damn it.
I know. What's interesting, I will say with the book, it's really about communicating in all fields. And so it's less about like when you have those onstage moments. So the onstage moments are so critically important, but yet the good news and the bad news is there's not one key magic answer to this. So I
Okay.
do think that people can I do think the way you show up, absolutely the way you show up, if you're showing that like I care, I am really wanting to connect with you, I'm sending that energy, I am receiving from you, like your engagement, that piece, that people feel much more engaged during this speech. And then therefore they're paying more attention and more likely to remember. So that is critically important. I think in terms of the content that's memorable, it's either those catchy phrases. There's a woman that gave a speech in tech, I don't know, 10 years ago, and she's saying, well, my goal is to make data delightful. And when you say something like
How?
that,
How do you do that?
right. And so that's what's interesting, right? Is it's like she didn't give you the how and that. We just leave with like, wow, this woman or this company or their job is like to make data delightful, and that is like it's an alliteration. It's also sort of a oxymoron. We don't normally think about like data being delightful, and so those types of phrases can be, your marketing team can come up with like these beautiful phrases, and obviously your follow-up question is like, how do you do that? I don't know. I don't know how she does it, but you remember it. But the stories, which, we can talk about all the things that go wrong with stories, but when they're done well and they bring you on an emotional journey and they have a clear point and relevance at the end, that can also really last. And that's what typically people will do. We do all kinds of exercises where we've tried where people will listen to a TED Talk or watch a speech, and they remember the examples or they remember the stories. They don't remember the data. They don't remember any of the information, but they typically remember that unless there's a really catchy phrase like delightful data. They remember that too.
Delightful data.
Delightful data.
Well, and you mentioned TED Talk, and I'm wondering, TED Talks, I mean, they vary in length, but say you're giving a 5-minute speech or a 10-minute speech. You want to engage your audience as quick as possible. Are there tricks or tips that you can provide that say to the speaker, here's the fastest way to build trust with your audience?
Mm. Okay, well, it's interesting. Trust is different than engagement. Like, so for trust, I would say it's that counterintuitive thing of like the more nervous we feel, the more closed off we get. And that can be
Mhm.
closed off physically or closed off with our face or closed off with our voice. And the more you're willing to be vulnerable and literally show more of yourself, but also give more of yourself, with your facial expressions, with your body language, with like leaning in, the more they're going to trust you. So there's just so much around the visual, around really being able to connect and not feeling any sense of the speakers holding back, that they're okay, that they might make a mistake. They're okay that they want to connect. They're okay physically. Wanting to connect you with eye contact says so much. But the eye contact, one of the things that, again, to me is so common sense, but I still see it, is that we don't want to scan the room. And I remember my kids are now college age, but I remember when they were in third grade, but they had to give a speech about the book, and they had to stand up in front of the room and do their book report or just their little speech on their book. And the teacher would ding them if they didn't scan every eye. So that was their whole thing. They had to
Every
run
eye.
the room. Yeah, they had to go and like look at the whole room. And if they didn't scan the whole room, they would get dinged. And I would sit in the back of the room being like, oh my gosh, this poor teacher who worked so hard and is so earnest. I don't want to correct her, but no, don't do that. The problem with scanning is twofold. One, when you are the speaker and you are scanning, you are collecting so much data. You're noticing that that person's looking at their phone. That person looks bored. That person's asleep. That person looks almost like scarily engaged. Like, so we're up on way too much data that we're processing, which really prevents us from thinking about connection in our content. So that's one problem. But the other problem from the audience standpoint, they don't feel engagement. They just feel like you're scanning. It almost feels like the airport TSA, like, okay, I'm scanning and, I don't know, some version of like, this is not connection. So instead it feels counterintuitive, but talk about like really engaging with one person or one section of the audience for a while, for 3 to 5 seconds, which is 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, not fast, and make them feel comfortable, which makes us feel comfortable. It feels more like a connection. And counterintuitively, the whole entire room feels better connected to you because they see a human side of you and they feel like you're more at ease, the audience is more at ease versus the whole scanning or avoiding the eyes altogether. None of those things create connection. Eye contact and then moving on to that next section and holding it for another, aim for 5 seconds. And if you aim for 5 seconds, you'll probably make it to 3. And that piece really helps audiences with trust.
It's funny. My husband is an engineer,
Yeah.
and sometimes when he spoke to me earlier in our relationship, he was constantly here, and I'd say, "Eyes on me. I'm up here. Eyes on me." And then I did it with my kids, and now when they look at me and talk to me, they're like, "Hi, mom." How are you?"
No, I'm not you. Yeah, exactly. Well, it is. I mean, and there is something to be said, with your husband aside, I work in tech a lot. And so there are some versions of neurodivergence, which you can't, like the eye contact feels very uncomfortable. In a stage environment, it's okay because I'm like, you don't have to look at their eyes. Look at their hair. Look at their t-shirt. Look at, it just, the idea is you're holding focus, you're creating space for them and for you. And as a speaker, it grounds you too. It makes it less frenetic.
Do you have a list of here are the top 5 primary mistakes most speakers make in business communications?
I don't have a list, but I can tell you from my brain, just, with this question. Well, okay. So the eye contact is one of them. And certainly on stage that comes up, but in the office too, or on Zoom, when they're looking at the screen, that's obvious. But even when they're not, the other thing that they do is it depends on the context or the setting. But when I've worked with companies who are pitching business or companies who have to deliver bad news or anything that you need credibility, when the speaker looks up to think. And it's not that we as an audience, I mean, there's studies around like when you look up one way, it's lying and other way, you're making it up. We consciously can guess that the person is not intentionally lying to us, but it does break that level of confidence or trust. So I work hard. There's one of my favorite exercises, which is very hard to do. It is in the book called 5 Items, where you practice talking while holding eye contact and thinking. You're given a prompt that's hard to process, and you need to be thinking while holding eye contact because it is something you can learn, and it is something that will really help to enhance trust in all settings, but particularly when you need to to give difficult news or like convince someone that your business model works or whatever it may be. So so the eye contact, both in terms of like connecting, but also making sure you're not looking up to think. In terms of presenting, like when people have to present to the board or they have to present to all hands and they're not used to it, it's so often that they talk too fast. I'm a fast talker and I like the energy of fast talk, but the difference is that I had to learn was don't slow down because then you can sound like a robot or sound really unnatural. So instead, if you're a fast talker or that that's your nervous habit, is to insert pauses. Say a phrase, pause. Say a sentence, pause. It might not be a long pause, but enough to prevent you from just creating noise pollution. So the eyes and the pace are I would say you asked for a list of 5. I'm giving you 3. I'm saying, a cold eye. And then the pace, those 3 things come up a lot. I guess for women, I don't really hear this with men, the disclaimers, the I'm sorries, and I catch myself all the time. I did it earlier on the podcast. oh, I just want to do this, or maybe we should. So any of those weakening words or phrases, yeah, pull those out.
Yeah, I am constantly, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's just part of the vocabulary that I use, and I
We're
really
conditioned.
work hard to strip that out, but it still comes up.
I
It's
know.
so frustrating.
I know.
What do you say? So, obviously, we know that you can practice and get better, but I do hear often people say, "I will never be a good speaker. I'm not a natural. I would need so much work." And I don't think that's true. And again, back to teaching, but when I saw my students, at the beginning of the semester versus the end of the semester, when we would do exercises that would require them to get in front of the room, I
Yeah.
saw quite a lot of learning and improvement along the way. So I know it's possible, and I know through you that it's possible. But what do you say to those folks who say, "I'm not a natural speaker," or I could never be an effective speaker?
I mean, what I would say academically or in a podcast is that everyone starts out speaking. We're all, when we're little kids, when we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, no one's saying, I'm not a natural speaker. So, somewhere along the lines, we wind up feeling self conscious. Maybe we had a traumatic experience. Maybe that book club report you had to give out loud in front of the class in second grade really terrified you, or any number of things could have happened throughout your life that make you think that. So there is an inner critic. There's a story in there, and we need to reverse that story. And I have some really good exercises about this in the book. And one thing I'll say is that like the turnaround story by Byron Katie is a really important. I have an adaptation in the book. It's just around like identifying what your story is. It's like, I'm not a good speaker. Or I'll never be a good speaker, and reversing it to its opposite. I'm giving you the short version, and then coming up with evidence throughout your life that you have been a decent speaker. And these could be, I was able to speak to my new neighbor who moved in, and I didn't know her, but it was someone I didn't know, and I could communicate really clearly with them, and I felt fine doing it. It could be little things, like little pieces of evidence of like, I have done it. And then just building up that confidence of I can do it. I have the ability to do it. And now I just need to make sure, this is not simple, but I need to make sure that I'm not letting my fears get the best of me and coming up with some other strategies instead of fear for preventing me from presenting or preventing me from thinking I can't do it well.
Right. Do you have a process that you use to initially work with the speaker or help them start to have a more positive outlook about being a speaker?
But
What's
it's
your secret, Hope?
I know everything is so bespoke. So like one of the things is like there's an intake form, and so things come up about like their fears or their goals, and there can be so many different things that resonate with different people. So it might be exposure therapy. It might be like, hey, just present to me right now, and they may be like, I'm not ready. I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, but I'm your coach, and I am here, and I am supporting you. You can do this, and no one else is going to see it, and the other thing about that, Michelle, is like recording them, because our inner critic is so intense that when we can record and I can safely watch with them, 99.9% of the time, they are pleasantly shocked. They're like, wow. And it's not like they're like, oh, I'm amazing, but they're like, oh, I really thought I was rambling, or I really thought whatever else they really thought. And then they go back and listen. What I do, and the trick I do is I don't just like all of a sudden show them the video. We'll record, we'll listen first. And that almost always is where they're like, oh, I sound pretty coherent. And like a little known fact is that we are thinking a minimum of 600 words per minute. Studies vary. They'll say between 600 and like 3,000 words per minute. Depends on how you're counting, like what images count for words. But regardless, a minimum of 600 words a minute, but we're speaking 125 words a minute. So what that means is when our fear is raised, those extra thoughts that are coming for every word are typically negative, are typically critical, are like, oh, wait, why did you say that? Wait, you're not supposed to say sorry. Oh, damn it, I said sorry again. And like, it's just this like cycle, this train, because the stakes are higher, or our fear is that. And so once they listen to it, once they listen to the recording or listen to themselves, I'll say like audio record a meeting that you're presenting at. You just do it from your end and listen to it. And once they realize, okay, wow, I actually sounded coherent, I made sense, I wasn't rambling, or whatever it is, then they'll catch something else. Like the second time they'll listen, they're like, oh, but there were a lot of ums and ahs. Oh, whatever. But like typically that builds the confidence of I'm much better than I thought I was.
Sometimes we work with very large organizations. and they are given almost a script that
Mm,
they are required to give to either of the very large company they work for or lead or a large conference.
mhm,
And it may have been written for them,
right.
and yet they have to deliver it as though
Mhm.
they are connected with the content and are inspired by that. How do you coach an executive to connect with content that they did not develop?
Yeah, this happens to me all the time, especially on stage presentations. And even like you said, even when they are really intended writers who think that they have the voice of the speaker, it's still hard many times for the speakers to get behind it, either because it feels too much like marketing or it doesn't feel like exactly their words. The first thing I do is I work really hard with the speaker and I try to team up with the marketers or the speech writers and just say, do we have some latitude here? Can we replace a few words as long as we're not changing the meaning? Can we get it so that it's in their words? Or we'll say, like, wait, read it out loud. Like before we make any changes, so read it out loud the whole time and we'll hear, does anything stick? Does anything like really work well or anything is not working well? So trying to like see, can we make some adaptations? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes like you just can't, like it's gone through legal, it's gone through marketing, speech writing to marketing to legal, whatever it may be. So in which case I'm like, okay, so speaker, let's do this. Let's come up with why, like what's the why of this event? What's the why of your role here? What's the why of this speech? Why does this matter? Why do you care? Why is it important to the people in the room? And honestly, there are a number of times when they're like, because I have to do this. I'm told,
Right.
right? So that's not, I'm sure you deal with that when in media training too. And like, okay, because I'm the spokesperson and I have to represent the product or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, then why do you love the product? Why is this important to your team? How hard did they work on this? What will be the benefit of you giving this speech or you presenting? What will be the benefit to you, your team, the product, the company? And try to really infuse some meaning and
Yeah.
some personal meaning. And often it can be easier to do it for their team. They're like, oh, well, yeah, they need the credit. They worked so hard and yeah, we need to do it for them. Like, and so I'm like, great, think about your team. Think about that engineer who works so hard, or think about that person who really cares so much. Or on the other end, the user end of like, who's going to benefit from this information. So just creating some meaning. And otherwise, speakers can get really negative because they're just like, I'm forced to do this. I don't like this speech. I don't resonate with it. It feels too exaggerated. It's not literal, or any number of things come up. And sometimes that's just fear talking. And so it's like really, stick to like that. Why does this matter?
Yes. All right, let's talk about body language. I see as you're making your points, you're using your hands to help accentuate the points that you're making. So let's talk about body language and what kind of a role does that play in all of this?
Yeah, well, I think what happens is almost the absence of not having body language makes it look unnatural. Because
Yeah.
if you go anywhere and you watch people tell stories or explain something, talk about their summer trip, they're going to use gestures. It's natural, it's a way that we communicate. And for some reason, when we get into a work setting, and not for some reason, because we're scared, because it's the stakes are higher, we start to close down. And so I try to get people to almost reverse engineer it a little bit because they can't remember what their natural gestures are. So say, all right, great. Let's think about things that are natural reasons to gesture. One is scale. So we can talk about, we're going to go for 3 weeks to Croatia. And so, or, this product's going to help this way. So some version of scale, it could be high, it could be low, it doesn't matter, but scale is something. Talking about comparison of like, last year we did a camping trip and this year we're going to Croatia. So compare and contrast, or numbering. It's not like we want to do like this necessarily, but you could, especially if you're on a stage, you can do that. But even in a conference room, it could be like, okay, so our first step is this, then we're going to go do this and this, or it could be going cross horizontal. So if you think about scale, compare, contrast, or numbering in some ways, that sort of warms you up. And especially for people who are just so freaked out about gestures, I was like, let's just practice there. Like, let's look at your talk and let's look at where you need to use those things and see how that works. But in general, I think like the more we start to do it, the more we will do it. Like, I don't notice that I'm doing it. I know that gestures do help to tell the story and do help to emphasize points. The other thing we'll do is have people tell their presentation, give their presentation just with gestures. So not with words. So this is a funny exercise, but you would have them like not talk and be like, I mean, it's silly. It feels really
Wow.
ridiculous, but it helps to get them, first of all, just like comfortable with doing it and to have them really go over the top. And that's helpful, especially before a high stakes situation where they're nervous, so that when you're in the room, you're going to do it, but maybe you're going to be a little bit more muted. I think that the problem, and many people say, I gesture too much. I'm Italian. I'm this. I'm that. But like insert any ethnicity. I
Yeah.
am this. I
Yes.
gesture too much.
Yes.
And not any, but there's a variety
Yeah.
that come up. And what I'd say is it's only so two things. One is people always think that if you're doing the same one over and over, or if it's like, a distraction, and I'm doing that. Like I play with my hair too much. There's like a variety of things. Like if there's like a hand ringing, if there's something like that that's distracting, okay, we want to get rid of that or just use that energy in a different way. But for the most part, people are more worried about their gestures being distracting than they really are. And having no gestures can make you just look a little less natural or less connecting. So
Yes.
I do encourage people to do that.
You are reminding me, and I'm like embarrassed thinking about it, but I did a talk and the setup was so weird. They had like two really big screens on, and then there was a big gap in the middle, and it was a very large room. And there was no podium, not that I was going to stand at a podium, but I didn't know where to stand. And so I was here, and then I literally walked very fast over to the other side of the room because I was like, how am I going to gauge these people who are way over here?
Right.
And I remember I invited some of my students to come to the event and be part of it and learn. And I remember looking down at one of my students, and he was laughing so hard because he was like, "You are sprinting," and I was like, I am. I'm almost out of breath because I did not understand how to work the room in a natural way.
Yeah.
So somebody gets up on stage. They're obviously not going to stand still unless they are on the X marks the spot for a
Right.
TEDx talk.
Right.
But how do you work a large stage? I would like to know, damn it.
Okay, let me tell you, damn it. So just like with talking about not winging it, like using structure, it's similar with the stage. It's like break it into parts. I think of the magic of threes. Of even with your two big screens, I mean, were there audience members all throughout, or were they just in front of the
It
two
was
screens?
chairs of people that spanned the whole room.
Yeah. So having all those three areas as your focal points of your standing points of like at times I'm going to like stand in the middle and say something that I already know that I don't need the speaker notes to say or to explain a point, and then walk over to the one screen where I might need the speaker notes. And I think that is hard when people are using teleprompters or they're super reliant on their speaker notes, because then they have this version of like, oh, I have to be seeing them. So ideally, there's some version of rehearsal so you can see what you're going to get yourself into, and you can know how to plan like, okay, I'm going to be in the center when I'm saying this, and then I move over there. A client said to me, which I thought was really cool that he told me this. He was like, oh, what you're telling me is kind of like baseball. I was like, baseball? He's like, yeah. He's like, so I start and I hit the ball, and then I walk to first base, or I run to first base in baseball, but I'm going to walk to
Okay.
first base. And then you're telling me is hang on first base, and then talk to this side of the room, talk to this side of the room, talk to the middle. So that's like when they're hitting. And then I go to second base. It's this idea
Yeah.
like you sit there and like when you're on base or you're on your focal point, you are engaging different parts of the room, but you're not continually moving, and you're doing things with intention. And especially, I mean, your room seems weird, but like if you had, like what I'll often say is in the middle of the room is like when you want to share the big announcements or like the big
Okay.
news, and then you go to the side, and from the side, you can still engage people on all sides just by like pivoting your body a bit, but like making sure that each of those places gets love, and you're not like the cage tiger or out of breath running back and forth.
Where were you 10 years ago?
I wish we knew each other then, and I
We
was
didn't
on
know each other then. So we'll wrap up here soon. I could talk to you all day.
I know.
But what would you say are the common traits that the best speakers share?
Yeah. I think the best speakers are just human. I know that sounds like, what does that mean? But are able to bring themselves, their true selves into whatever environment they're in. Maybe it's a slightly elevated, but they have some version of humor, they have strength and warmth. So, like, whatever combination of those two that you have in your real life, if you bring that with you to the speaking opportunity. So the warmth is like the warm facial expressions, the eye contact, the sound of your voice. Maybe it's in your content, like the benefits or the fact that you're focused on the audience. And the strength is the clarity. The strength is the statements you're making with pauses. The strength is maybe your posture or your gestures that are, because gestures can also be warm and they can also be really clear. So having both of those things together, but doing it in a way that's like truly reflective of who you are when you are your best self in your life.
Okay. And before we say goodbye, are there any stories you want to leave us with from working with clients that were maybe unsure of themselves and then nailed it on the stage? And what changed or what was their aha moment?
Yeah, so I do. I do. I have a woman who is in charge of product at a big company, and she is Israeli, and she's got a strong accent. And she actually came from well, it doesn't matter because I don't want to give away who she is. But she hated speaking. I started working with her maybe 5 years ago. She hated it. She had no interest. She wanted to focus on her team, her products, all the things. Like, did not have any need for being on stage, but her role demanded it of her. And so we would get up there and she would say words that I couldn't understand. And so that was like, one of those examples of like, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to rework the script. And so I was like, look, don't worry what the script says. You explain it in your words. And like we recorded it. And then we, married the two and was like, let's make this authentic to you because it's not going to work. And like that took a little bit of massaging, but eventually we got there. She's still fine. It's in her words. She still was too nervous and was like, I don't want to do this. I do not want to do this. This should not be about me. This should be about my team. This should be a product. Like, I want to focus on the product. I was like, okay. So that's where we were talking earlier is I was like, okay, so why should this be about your team? It's like, because they worked so hard. They worked around the clock. And so we really started to focus on, okay, so given that it's a stage, it's only so big, how many members of your team? Oh, there's like 45 or whatever. I'm like, we can't get them all on here, but you're representing them. You're representing their hard work. You're representing all of the things that they have accomplished. Don't do this for you. Don't do this for the company. So I was like, do it for them. Do it for the people in your team. Like, think about who they are. And it was a huge turning point. Huge. Like,
Hmm.
literally, like, yeah, I do too. Yes. And she was able to do it. And she was like, that was all the difference. I needed to know that I was like up there for them. Like, I told them before I went on there, I am doing this for you. I got up there thinking about them. I left thinking about them. And so I've worked with her continually. And she sometimes will forget. She's like, I don't want to do it. I'm like, my
Yeah.
goodness. And she's like, I know, my team, they worked so hard. So yeah, it really helped. And the accent piece too, it was just working with the words that she needed to say and also being like, that's who you are. We do create more spaces between statements. We've done some things to make sure she's understood, but also is like, don't feel like you need to change yourself either. And people come up to me during the rehearsals and they say, she can't say that word. That word is not clear. And I was like, that word is clear enough. The context makes it clear enough. This is who she is. It's her word. I really defend my speakers at times. She just did one a couple months ago and nailed it. So yeah,
I
it's
love it.
really heartening when that happens and when you can find the piece that makes it work for them and for the audience.
Where can people connect with you?
Yes. So I'm Hope Timberlake, no relation to Justin, but on LinkedIn, I am pretty active and I check my messages and I love to connect with people. And then my website is Forte Consulting, which is FORTEF.com. So ForteSF.com. So yeah,
Thank you so much,
thanks,
Hope. It was
Michelle.
so fun to hang out
Yeah,
and learn from you as I always do.
likewise. Great.
All right. Take
Thanks for having
care.
me.
Until next time. Bye.